Dear friends, welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Rochester, a congregation rooted in the prairie where we have nurtured spiritual growth and practiced justice for over 150 years. Today's service will celebrate the heritage with music and words of the prairie and the revival spirit of universalism. This is a joyful day indeed, as we install a minister and we instill in each member and friend of this congregation a calling to shared ministry, where we each find and share our gifts for the flourishing of this church and the creating of a more just and equitable and inclusive neighborhood, city, and world. Today is a day for us to all renew our commitment to the values of justice, compassion, liberation, grace, and love.
The last two settled ministers of our church, while they can't join us today, offer these greetings. Reverend Dr. Carol Hepikoski writes, "Greetings and blessings from the Northland during this season of change. The installation of a new minister represents the beginning of a new partnership in ministry. And it is indeed a call for celebration. May the ministry you create together be a blessing to the gathered community, and may that blessing ripple out in ever-widening circles. As you move together into the future, may the strengths of the past and the hopes of the present guide you on your way. Many blessings for a rich and deep ministry together." And from Reverend Dillman Baker Sorrells, "I send greetings and best wishes to you, Luke, and this fine church on an auspicious day. I anticipate years of your working together, growing together, enjoying both as you develop a sense of trust and joy in your mutual labor. As you already know, this is an outstanding church, enriched by its strong history and in the development of this city, and by the devotion that its members have lavished on it for decades. With their curiosity in spiritual and religious growth, their work in social justice, their appreciation of beautiful worship, in caring for each other and in their space. They are a joy to serve as minister. Enjoy their playfulness as well as their gravity. Serve them well. Blessings on all from the South." During today's offering, we will collect funds for the Living Tradition Fund, which supports ministers in many ways, including need-based scholarships and emergency assistance during formation, while serving, or in retirement. Checks can be made out to First UU Church with Living Tradition in the memo line. You can also give online at uua.org.
On a personal note, I want to thank Reverend Luke for inviting our family to be part of this special day today. Many of us on the search team felt the process of searching for a new minister to be very much like speed dating, or what we would imagine that to be like. Reading profiles, meeting online, and then that super intensive first date weekend where you're together for like 48 hours. So after making our choice, it was time to have the minister meet the congregation, the parents. Of course, their approval meant everything. And while an installation is much like a marriage ceremony, this is actually where the analogy starts to falter. Instead of starting a new life together, we are continuing a relationship that started in Rochester over 150 years ago. The covenant we are taking today between the congregation of First Unitarian Universalist Church of Rochester and the Reverend Luke Stevens Royer is a promise to continue the important work that began generations ago. Not only are we entering into a shared ministry with a new minister, but it's a new shared ministry with each other. We are reaffirming our purpose and mission as a congregation and inviting a new person to join us on this journey. All of this is done with the recognition that we are but a temporary stewards of this congregation, and it is our purpose to cultivate a religious community that will be here long after all of us are gone.
This afternoon, we light this chalice with these words from the Reverend Eliza Tupper Wilkes, minister of this church in 1871. Life has within it a recreating force. Our destinies are in our own hands.
Here on this day, with the air so crisp, it feels like biting into a fall apple. Here on this land of big blue stem and switchgrass, the traditional home of the Dakota that we acknowledge and honor today, here in this place among a community of colleagues, friends and family, and a faithful congregation born of the Universalist message of Reverends Westfall, Wakefield, and Wilkes. Here in this moment when our hearts are alive with hope and our souls thirsty for the flowing streams of the holy. Here and now, we come together to bless and give thanks for this installation of a beloved minister within a beloved faith community. A minister called by lineage and radical grace. A congregation called by faithful perseverance and hope, both called by dreams for a flourishing community and work that is real. Today, we lean into the Universalist gospel of our ancestors and the Universalist wisdom embedded in the prairie on which we gather. That the soil of our faith can be enriched by unflinching attention to the radical and complex nature of our root systems. That diversity invites and sustains health. That a creating, flourishing community is born out of freedom and structure, structural justice. That all creation sings if we have the ears to listen and the heart to join in. Here on this day, may we remember that we are meant to love. We are meant to work in joy, to build the kingdom of God on earth with a song in our hearts. Come, let us worship together. As we sing this opening hymn, let us be mindful that this is a prayer that was born of African people as they tried to restrict the assault on their humanity, and was reawakened in the 60s in the freedom schools, readying activists to sit at lunch counters in protest. May our singing be full of those prayers and full of that courage. We're gonna sit at the welcome table. We're gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. Hallelujah. We're gonna sit at the welcome table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. We're gonna sit at the welcome table. Yeah, we're gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. Hallelujah. We're gonna sit at the welcome
Homesteading by Minnesota poet Joyce Sutphin. Long ago, I settled on this peace of mind, clearing a spot for memory, making a road so that the future could come and go, building a house of possibility. I came across the prairie with only my wagon load of words, fragile stories packed in sawdust. I had to learn how to press a thought like seed into the ground. I had to learn to speak with a hammer, how to hit the nail straight on. When I took up the reins behind the plow, I felt the land threading through me, stitching me into place.
From Is Unitarianism for the Masses by Reverend Eliza Wilkes, minister of this church in 1871. She was writing in response to a statement by a Unitarian minister that ours was a tradition meant for the educated and intellectual elite. She writes, "The feeling that our gospel is for the few hampers all our missionary work. Who are the masses? Do we mean the people who are doing the world's rough work? The overburdened peoples whose bodies are deformed by toil? If these starving souls are reaching for something, have we no food? If, for all these weary and heavy laden, Unitarianism has no rest, then so much the worse for Unitarianism. If ours is a cult philosophy for the cultured few, if we have to offer a rose-colored bed of ease for religion, if we only have delicacies instead of food for the hungry, then our end is at hand. Our simple message is intended for the most despondent of God. For us, with our faith in humanity, with our message of hope and good cheer, where can we hesitate? Into the lowest hell of remorse we may go to cry, look up, you are all God's child. There is hope and help for you. Into the darkest night of sorrow, we may take the light.
Luke. In Jim's reading by Joyce Sutphin, the poet is telling us your story. Long ago, I don't really know how long ago it was, but many years ago, you settled on this peace of mind and made a road within yourself so the future could come and go, building in your imagination a house of possibility. I think in your case, that house always looked like some kind of church. You went across the prairie. You hauled your wagon load of words to Iowa and then New Brighton, and you honed the art of pressing thoughts like seeds into the ground. You found your true voice rising from within you, but refined and ratified in the experience of your listeners, your people. Congregations in Dubuque, in St. Paul, in Minneapolis, and Matamidi. And now you're here, and the land you love has stitched you into place, your prairie home with its deep, deep blue stem roots. You're here with your family, with Jenna and Louisa and Clara, and with your grandpa Stoll and his legacy around your shoulders. And now that house of possibility, that church, is real, and it's asking right out loud, well, Will you travel with us, travel in place with us, this place, travel in time with us, honoring with us our past, conjuring with us our future? Will you live with us into our shared hope for our own lives and for this beautiful broken world? And we've come to affirm the church's question and to affirm your intention to say yes. We've come with gladness, smiling, your colleagues, your family, your friends, your people, because it is rare that something fits so perfectly and feels as right as does this call from First Church Rochester for you to be their minister. This congregation ordained a minister years and years ago, the first you would ordain and the last until 2015. Eliza Tupper Wilkes was distinguished in her vocation not only by her gender and not only by her singular talent for planting robust prairie churches, but also for her endorsement by both the Unitarians and the Universalists. In 1887, as you heard, she wrote a word of warning to the former, a word which we in our time might heed with care, because she was talking about relevance. What does our movement have to offer our world? She was talking to the Unitarians about elitism. She was speaking in her own 19th century language about the kind of white supremacist exclusionary exceptionalism that runs through our history and our present like some kind of genetic disorder. She spoke the truth in love. The feeling that our gospel is for the few hampers all our work, she said. Have we no food for the masses, for the overburdened men and women whose lives are deformed by toil? If ours is a philosophy for the cultured few, if all we have to offer is a rose-colored bed of roses, of ease for religion, if we have only delicacies instead of food for the hungry, then our end is at hand. You might say, and well, it should be. She was a mighty force, speaking out of a tradition, a lived and real-life faith that was and is a mighty force. This faith, Universalist, Unitarian, Universalist, this faith is a house of possibility. There are no guarantees that we will ever properly practice the radical and saving faith that we have inherited. There are no guarantees at all that we will ever be brave enough and humble enough to practice our religion faithfully. But our tradition, and this church within that tradition, is a house of possibility, still holding with open, outstretched hands this question of the Reverend Eliza Wilkes. This congregation was founded 151 years ago, planted on the prairie on a foundation of good news, the doctrine of radical love, forgiveness, and grace, which was universalism in America in the 19th century. There's another name for this doctrine, as we have known for centuries, including murderous centuries, when our forebears were imprisoned and tortured and burned by governments and churches. That other name for this doctrine is heresy. To understand that we are all saved, all beloved, not because of what we've done or what we own or where we went to school or how we look or whom we love, but because of what we inherently are, which is human, which is part of the family of all things. To understand all as beloved is to undermine every kind of standing order everywhere, every principality and power, and therefore it is heresy. To acknowledge human evil, our waywardness, our brokenness, the countless ways we injure and betray each other, our cruelty, our pettiness, our racism, our greed, our sinfulness, to acknowledge all that and yet still trust that we might be redeemed, forgiven, made whole. Well, that's a threat to power. Universalism's early adherents truly believed their religion was scripturally sound, spiritually healing, profoundly democratic, and relentlessly active. It called people, it calls us, to establish here on earth not exactly the kingdom of God, not a monarchy, but beloved community, a world in which it might be easier to try to want to be good. The Universalist intention was to build and to be a house of possibility forcefully. In 1866, this was good news planted by strong hands in the soil of southern Minnesota. Starting churches from the ground up is hard work in any soil. I believe they foresaw you, you who occupy this space right now, the members and friends and the children of this congregation. I believe they could not have done it otherwise. And not maybe all of them, but one or two very strong ones in their hoop skirts and their bonnets and their breeches and their suspenders. They gazed out over the fields and they saw you coming. They foresaw a strong possibility that a century and a half later, something generous and life-sustaining, heretical, would still be in the business of sharing worthy food with a hungry, hurting world and not hoarding these dainty delicacies. They conjured possibility, and there were things they couldn't see then, but maybe they somehow felt it. 1 year after the Civil War, they could not have imagined 99 years later sending their minister down to Selma, Alabama, which they did in 1965. They couldn't have seen it, but they felt it. Nor could the people who did that, the church that was then, have imagined the moment that we're all in right now. But they readied the soil. They planted their seeds. They built and kept building their house of possibility. The poet says, making a road so the future could come. That's what congregations do when they're strong and brave and clear. Another poet, alive in 1866 but planted way back east, wrote famously, "I dwell in possibility, a fairer house than prose." The poetic imagination is the spiritual imagination. Those people couldn't see you, but they did. We can't know ever for certain that we're beloved of God, not fallen, irredeemable, damnable, damned. We can't know for certain anything like that, but we proclaim the possibility. We say we can see it, this unlikely but steadfast promise of reconciliation. We proclaim it, and then we proceed to make it real. All around, you know, the evidence says otherwise. The bad news bleeds from the paper or spits out of your phone every morning like a recitation of the Passover plagues. Environmental protections erased. Reproductive care for women eviscerated. Health care for anybody, and especially the poor, trampled. Food assistance denied, nuclear war pondered, assaults on young, dreaming immigrants and all immigrants, assaults on women and girls and transgender soldiers and queer people generally, and people of color and people with disabilities and the old and the sick and the poor, the decimation of Black lives, denial of science, mocking of truth, the failure to offer tangible or even intangible support to people whose homes and lives have been destroyed as the waters rise and the fires rage. The evidence is hard against the Universalist imagination. Cornel West, a Christian socialist, reminds us, in this bleak moment, we must inspire each other driven by a democratic soulcraft of integrity, courage, empathy, and a mature sense of history, even as it seems our country is slipping away. As one whose great family and people survived and thrived through slavery, Jim Crow, and lynching, I know the neo-fascist rhetoric and predictable authoritarian reign. It's just another ugly moment. It calls forth the best of who we are and what we can do. For us in these times, he says, to even have hope is too abstract, too detached, too spectatorial. Instead, we must be a hope. We must be participants. We must be a force for good as we face the catastrophe together. The work of the church is to hold those who mourn, to mark the milestones of sorrow and joy with sacrament and awe, to move through the wheel of the year and the cycles of the seasons with gratitude and gladness. The work of the church is comfort and community, and the work of the church is as well and at the same time prophetic disruption. To speak truth to power, to raise the flag of conscience on the public square, to turn the economic tables, to proclaim not just in words but in every gesture, welcome to the stranger, reverence for this living earth, liberation to the prisoner, full equality without a single exception. This was once called the social gospel, to ask first in prayer and then out loud, what do you care about as a citizen or a person? What do you love? What commandments will you live by? And to what are you prepared to testify, not with your words, but with the evidence of your living? Your congregation has held these questions for a long time. These were the questions burning in the mind of Eliza Wilkes. What thou lovest, she said, thou becomest. If you believe that all are saved, all are worthy, all equally beloved, and you have no fear of hell, what are the implications for you? What does that glad gospel mean? When we welcome babies in our congregations, we touch them with water and a flower. They hear from the get-go with their tiny, beautiful ears that some things transcend our understanding utterly. There's no explaining it, the love of God, the breath of life, the holiness that holds us all. It's larger than any of our shortcomings, any of our sins, and it longs for our wholeness, maybe more than we do, because it knows, as we generally do not, our holiness. This love longs for us to answer it by loving the world and one another. We never say, because we don't believe it, we absolutely don't, we dedicate you to the fires of hell unless you measure up. We don't say it. Or we dedicate you to judgment and damnation because of the stain of original sin and corruption which we see all over your beautiful little face. We don't say that. We don't believe it. Nor do we dedicate them to the larger luck. We speak to babies of a larger love because that's where we know we dwell. And in dedicating one child, we rededicate ourselves to all of them, all of us. For several years, I was honored to hear your minister testify to this. Many times, I've heard Luke say these words with a baby in his arms. It is our faith that each child born is one more Redeemer. Beloved child of God, we bless you with water, source of life. May you be surrounded by a love as deep and sustaining as the ocean. We bless you with this rose, that you may know your beauty within the beauty that surrounds you in sunlight and moonlight, in forest and city. May you remember the dust from which you come, the inherent goodness of creation. May you remember where you come from, who you are, and may you dream who you are becoming. It is so easy to forget that, so hard to remember sometimes when you're discouraged, when you're depressed, when your body is unwell and it betrays you, or your spirit is fragmented, or when you're ashamed of something you've done or you haven't done, or when things fall apart and cruelty shows its power, hurting somebody you love or someone you don't even know. When the weight of the world is this crushing heaviness, more than you can hold, and you can't even raise your head to meet it. When you doubt the world's goodness and its beauty and your own, it's easy to forget that all are saved, including even you. It's hard to remember this glad gospel, and that's why there are congregations and ministers to proclaim it. Our call, yours, mine, Luke's, all of us, is to shape and share this possibility. The other day, I was preparing for a meeting at White Bear, and I came across the minutes of another meeting held there just about 6 years ago. These were from the first meeting of a search committee gathered in the summer of 2011 to seek a new minister to be with us for a while. We had no idea who that might be. opening the door of possibility, we lit our chalice with words from the Reverend Gordon McKeeman, Universalist. I'd forgotten all about it. He said, "Ministry is a quality of relationship between and among human beings, beckoning forth hidden possibilities, inviting us into deeper, more constant, more reverent relationship with the world and with each other. It requires belief in human dignity and equity, believing in life in the presence of death, and struggling against principalities and structure that ignore humaneness and become instruments of death. Ministry is speaking and living the highest we know, and living with the knowledge that it is never as deep, as wide, or as high as we wish. Whenever there's a meeting that summons us to our better selves, whenever our lostness is found, our fragments united, whenever our wounds begin healing, wherever our spines stiffen and our muscles grow strong for the task, wherever our hearts soften in love and compassion, there is our shared ministry." And now Luke has come here with his wagon load of words and his stories packed in sawdust, and also with his openness, his extraordinary, brave, and reverent openness to stories yet unfolding, his openness especially to the stories of this church, its history, and your stories. Together now, you dwell in possibility. In a moment, we'll bear witness as you make a covenant, minister and church. It's no private contract. It's a sign to all the world of your larger calling as a people, your covenant with hope and history. First Unitarian Universalist Church in Rochester exists, as it has from its founding, to proclaim the good news, to bind up the broken, to release from despair every prisoner of injustice and hatred, to turn the tables, make some noise, and welcome and comfort everyone who mourns. You're known for it. You always have been. And you are blessed beyond measure that Luke has said yes and will travel with you, travel in place with you for a good long while on this prairie. And Luke is blessed as well, and he knows it. Long ago, you settled on this peace of mind, clearing a spot for memory, making a road so the future could come and go, building a house of possibility. And you learned how, all of you, to press a thought, a dream, a promise, a holy intention into, like seed, into good ground. May the fruits of your planting continue abundant. May your table stay wide and welcome to all who will come with their hunger. Give the people something of your vision. Give them not hell, but hope and courage, not despair, but kindness and everlasting love. Amen. Amen.
If not now, tell me when. If not now, tell me when. We may never see this moment or place or time again. If not now, tell me when. I see sorrow, trouble in the land. I see sorrow, trouble in the land. Although there will be struggle, we'll make the change we can. If not now, tell me when. If
I invite the members of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Rochester, Minnesota, to please rise in body or spirit. We gather this day to install the Reverend Luke Stevens Royer as minister of First Unitarian Universalist Church. We have called you to live amongst us, to lead us in the paths of justice, compassion, and peace. Mindful of the great heritage of our living tradition and the 150 years that our church has been a prophetic presence of love and justice on this prairie, we look to you for moral leadership, for religious insight, and for spiritual guidance. Do you accept the invitation of this church to its ministry?
With the Spirit's guidance, I do.
And now if you will read with me, we, the members of the First Unitarian Universalist Church, hereby install you, Reverend Luke Stevens Royer, as minister of our church. For our part, we covenant to journey with you, with the cooperation of hearts and hands, and our gladness and goodwill, as you take up this ministry among us. We offer you a free pulpit, so you may speak the truth as you have come to know it in love. We would have you act courageously, compassionately, and draw our circle of welcome wide as we live into our shared hope for the world. We covenant to join with you as we nurture spirituality and practice justice.
In covenant with this congregation, its people, you, and its purpose, I will join with you and I will lead in ministry. I will speak freely and intentionally and reverently and act with courage and grace as much as I am able. With gratitude, with gladness, I take up this ministry.
Now remember, Luke, do as I say, not as I do. Right? Luke, as we gather this day to celebrate the beginning of this union of ministry together here in this place, it is only appropriate to bless you, the minister who is called here to serve these people. As a called minister, you feel the responsibilities of many things, as you are already aware of. You are pulled in many directions, from studying, writing, visiting, teaching, hospital visits, weddings, funerals, protests and marches, fighting for peace and justice in the world. And to top it all off, you also need to know how to change light bulbs and to vacuum. As if that wasn't enough for an individual, this is not your only calling. You are called to your family, to be present, to be a supportive, loving spouse, to be a father. And also, Luke, above all those other callings and responsibilities, you are primarily called to be a child of God. Beloved child of God. And that being said, that means that you are called to care for yourself. You cannot be a good father. You cannot be a good spouse if you are not healthy and caring for your own well-being, physical, mental, spiritual. You cannot be present as a minister and lead these people well if you are not well yourself. Luke, It is easy to give everything, every last drop, to ministry. It is a noble and worthy cause. It is good work, needed work, but it will take everything if you let it. There will always be another meeting, another visit, another book, another cause. Remember your calling to care for yourself and your calling to care for your family. Blessings to you in your many callings, and may you find balance. Peace to you, brother.
I'd like to invite the remaining members of the Board of Trustees to join Luke and Jerry at the front here. And it is good that you are facing your people. They are the ones who have elected you, but I have some words for you this afternoon. So if I could have your eyes for a second. Dear ones, you will have just a few words from me. You are the elected church leaders, and you share this ministry with Luke. And what I want you to remember today is what you own and what owns you. As board members, you own the fiduciary responsibility of the church. You own the creation of high-level policies of the church. You own the role, in many regards, of being lead listeners, hearing the stories under the stories, listening for that song that this congregation wants to sing. You own those things and much more. I've read Article 7 of your bylaws. There's a lot there. But what owns you? What really owns you? And what, by extension, owns this church? It's the mission. It's your mission. The mission of this 150-year-old plus religious institution, this liberal religious institution, to be a compassionate, welcoming community that nurtures spiritual practice, nurtures spiritual growth, and practices justice. That is a mission that is lofty and inspiring, and it owns you. Some days when the headlines are too much and too overwhelming, it might be easier to be owned by the building or the details or the finances. And those are important things, make no mistake about it, but we are living in a time when lives are at stake, and church or any religious institution as we've known it, it can't be business as usual any longer. And so let the mission own you. Be bold and courageous and truly embody your faith as you lead. Your task is a significant one. And so I offer you these words of blessing as you share this ministry with Luke and as you share this ministry with this beloved congregation. May this flame that burns before you light your way. May you be informed by the wisdom of leaders who have gone before you and inspired by the trust that has been given to you by this congregation. May you have vision, compassion, and courage as you serve this congregation now and for the generations to come. May you be blessed in this holy endeavor.
All right, beloveds, now I'm going to invite all of you to get in on the party. If you are comfortable, if you are willing, will you please rise, embody your spirit, and with permission, touch somebody close to you. I want us in a big human chain. We're going to together hold Reverend Luke the leaders of this congregation, and all of us who are here as either members or as the wider circle that endeavors to do this work with you as we lay hands on one another to share fortitude and blessing. Pray with me. Spirit of life, God of connection and conviction that courses through this congregation, linking the past with future and prophecy with fulfillment. We invoke your name here as we bless this new incarnation of the old shared ministry of this beloved community. We remember the roots of this congregation, a body gathered here on the prairie more than 150 years ago to preach the gospel of universal salvation, that all of us are born from an infinite spring of unceasing love, and that nothing we can do and nothing that can be done to us can separate us from that inborn belovedness. Bless us all, Spirit of life, with that same unshakable knowledge that we are known and seen and held by a love beyond all naming, which binds us together in radical interdependence and intimacy. Bless this congregation as they work to build a world in which all people can live into the promise of our birth, with access to safety and connection and health and wholeness for each and every member of our human family, no exceptions. Remind this community that they, like all of us, are the hands of God on earth, commissioned to reach out to one another across both difference and comfort, to build structures of justice and inclusion, to care for the earth and all creatures. Give them the courage to collectively resist systems of domination and alienation and violence, knowing that just as salvation is universal, liberation is collective, and none of us is free until all of us are free. And, God of possibility, give this congregation expansive hope, rooted in the unbounded potential of our original blessing. Help them be partners in the ever-unfolding enterprise of building that world for which our souls yearn, yet none of our eyes have ever seen. May these people be clear in their mission, bold in their action, and courageous in their connections. In that spirit, in your name, all God's people said, amen.
can pray some more. It's like making up. And will you pray with me? Holy One, source of radiance and reason, Thou whose love endows and animates our lives, we acknowledge Thy presence within and among and beyond us. Gathered at the threshold of so many new beginnings, we are humbled by the possibilities before us. Help us to be bold as we imagine and embody that peaceable community where everyone will know themselves beloved. Help this congregation lean into the obligations of its heritage. Help them reinvigorate their message of hope and good cheer, not only for the benefit of those with whom they hope to strengthen and renew this city, but also and especially for those imprisoned in the lowest hell of their remorse, or by society's disdain, that they too might look up and know themselves to be God's children. Help us to cleave to that which matters most. Strengthen us in service to the values which form the sure foundation of this holy church. Remind us now and always that in the eyes of God, there are no other people's children. May we be wise in learning how best to bring our good gospel to bear as this new ministry takes hold. May this be our promise and our prayer. Amen.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit for the benediction. About a year ago, I was at home singing Lutheran hymns with our daughter Louisa. That's what we do as our home. Amen. Some of the parents in our home. And there was a word in there that she wondered about. It was God. We had a conversation. Didn't know if it'd stick. Last week we were sitting at the table and we were singing a song, and God came up, and Louisa said, God is everything. 150 years ago on this prairie, a church was planted. And there was a message in the Universalist gospel: God is love. All people are beloved. All people are welcome. And it calls you to then treat each other as kindred, as family, as beloved. We are part of a long arc, and what seed is planted, days, months, weeks, years, decades, lifetimes, generations ago, keeps bearing fruit. Within us as individuals, within us as a community. May we remember we travel in a long arc and a long lineage of love and of justice, of inclusion, of welcome tables, where there is no one outside those boundaries. There is no border from heaven on earth, and we create it together. We are traveling in the blessing of those who've gone before, and someday we'll be united on that new and sunlit shore. Oh, when the saints